Okay, so I'll just ask my question in the analogy of computers. We're avatars in running in a computer system, and our avatars are evolving. Now, computer systems get upgrades to the operating system. Are you aware of any upgrades to this operating system? Anything that you are aware of changes in the rule set that have evolved, just like the Microsoft?
I'm not aware of that. That's evidently not part of my job description. But it doesn't mean that there aren't better, slicker ways of doing things, more efficient ways of doing things. Although the system is very, very old. I mean, we've been running the simulation since, the beginning of this universe, which is in the many billions of years. So it's not like it's got a lot of new things to deal with. So I don't know of any changes in the rule set like that, the basic rule set. I do know that from time to time, things have been adjusted where you learn about how this particular reality is working. So you tighten up a rule here and loosen a rule there. I think that happens. I think the fundamental rule set stays the same. But I think there were times in our history when interaction with the non-physical was much more common and stronger than it is now. We're more separated now than we were then. And that, I think, was because it didn't work out. It wasn't to our advantage. It was better to be separate like this, and communications with the non-physical has to be earned. It's not just there. There's something that you can do. So I think that was, an example of something that changed. It's not so much a change in a rule set as kind of a change in policy. So that sort of thing's changed. The psi uncertainty principle is something that will change as we grow up. That's one of those things that tries to prevent us from shooting ourselves in the foot. So as we grow up and don't have that tendency to be so self-destructive, then that can loosen up some. And on a local level, some of the, what you might talk about as the operating system, some of the, what do we say, administrators, those that kind of look over areas and make sure it's all running right, and the rules are being obeyed and things are working. You always have that, whether you call it part of the maintenance function or whatever, but it's always there. And in any organization, you have to have kind of oversight at the various major levels of what's going on. Otherwise, you kind of lose track of it, and things that maybe you don't want to happen might happen there. So you need to keep track of that and have some management. That changes from time to time. So you have not always the same attitude. Sometimes you'll have, you know how it is in a company, a new manager comes in, he has a whole different attitude toward things, and suddenly the way you do business changes. That happens sometimes, where you get a change in attitude and that happened with us in our management probably, I don't know, it's been about 20 years ago. There was a change in management that made a fairly significant change, actually. But it's all subtle enough that at this level you don't notice anything. So there's those things, but it's mostly in the margins, not too much of the big stuff. But the operating system is really what I call it that, or I call it the executive function. It's the same sort of thing. It's the control function. And that's what we think of when we talk about the larger consciousness system. So if we talk about that system and just the whole system, then we're a part of it. We are also, a part of that larger consciousness system. But then there's also this executive part that's kind of make sure everything works the way it's supposed to work. And it's that executive part that then we talk about as, well, the system really can be helpful to you. Well, it's really that executive part, or that's your interface with the system. It's that executive part that sets up that interface. So that, it's still just part of the system. And if you want to call it just another individuated unit of consciousness, well, it is. because we're just pieces of it. So it's another, but it's a little bit bigger and grander and more responsible in different ways, a piece of that consciousness than we are. But that's the executive function or the operating system. So you need that in any kind of organization. If you want to keep it organized, you have to have some tentacles out there that tries to keep order. So yeah, there's some minor changes.
Hi, I just have a question around still artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not asking from a place of fear, I'm asking from a place of curiosity and trying to be practical about it. Right now there's a huge thing going on with the schools, the children, the cell phones, and this and that, and technology that, and even to the point where now they're starting to convince people to get implants in their skin, under their skin. And some of them are even thinking about getting brain implants. To me, what the potential is there for control over their consciousness, maybe, or just their mind. I'm not sure how I can formulate that. But don't you think that's a huge change? Huge. I'd hate to think what these kids that you see now that are so immersed in technology are going to be like 30, 40, 50 years from now.
Okay. I would agree. It's a huge change. I don't know that it's going to be a bad change. I don't know that it's going to be really a good change. It's hard to say at this point. I don't really know where that's going, but I see some very good parts of this technology change, and I see some scary parts of this technology change. The very good parts of it, I think, are the very good parts of the internet. We have gained a lot of personal freedom because of the internet, where before this, and the kids are all over the internet. They live and breathe in the internet. They're on social media. You don't see a girl between the ages of 10 and 16 that doesn't have a cell phone in her ear, whatever they're doing. Well, yeah, a lot of guys too, but anyway, they're plugged in to this communication network. I see some really good things coming out of that, and that is we've gotten a lot of personal freedom that we didn't have before from that internet. Well, we get some nasty stuff on the internet too, but that's just the way life is. You're always going to have that element. But you have the ability now for us to interface, to interact with other people all over this planet. So instead of the people that live someplace else just being who cares, they live someplace else, and we're really not interested in their lives, we're not what they do or their hardships. It doesn't affect us, they're way over there. We hardly even know they exist. It's easy to write them off and not have any empathy for them. As this world shrinks because electronic communication expands, and now we're basically eyeball to eyeball with people all over the world, I think that's a great thing. Because now people all over the world become sort of like our neighbors. People we can care about, people we can have empathy with, people we can see something about what's going on in their lives. So that takes us a step closer to one world family, if you like, but I'd say that into one world family in the sense that we care about each other. It makes a difference to us what's going on the other side of the world. We have an opinion about it because we can see it, we can feel it, we can get day-to-day, looks at it. So that is good because that's helping us see the humanity of everybody, not just ourselves and the people close to us. So I think that's a tremendous thing that technology is giving us that's going to be good for us. It's going to be necessary for us. We can't exercise that mission we have to become cooperative until we actually are connected. Being connected somehow comes before being cooperative with each other. And this internet brings with it the first time ever that we can really get connected with everybody. And these little bubbles of consciousness little bubbles of enlightenment, I call them. They're all over, been around for thousands of years. You know, a little bubble comes up here, you know, a little bubble comes up there, and people understand, they have bigger pictures, it works fine, but it's off in the margin someplace. It never really makes it mainstream. Maybe it gets mainstream in one little area, but it doesn't grow because all these bubbles are all isolated from each other. They're all thousands of miles apart or whatever, and they can't reinforce each other. So eventually they just kind of die, get overrun, get dogmatic or whatever and go away. That necessarily won't happen anymore. We're all connected now. Big ideas can spread through the whole human population in weeks that would have been impossible before. Well, bad ideas can spread in weeks as well. But that's the struggle that always goes on. We can't avoid the good because we're afraid of the bad. You know, we move forward with that, and bad things happen sometimes. So that part of the technology that's out there is going to be a huge change, and I see that as very good. But now, are there going to be abuses of it? Are we going to create things that later on we see as creating problems? Maybe so. Technology, big technology advances tend to be that way. This, what do we call it, the information age. You know, this is the kickoff. You know, nobody's caught the ball yet, but the ball's been kicked off. The information age started with the internet. We don't know where that's going. We don't know exactly where it's going to go to, but the potential for positive is good. Potential for not so positive is still there, but it's not looming nearly as large as the good potential. But now look at the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution kicked off probably in some place in the 1700s, got up going strong enough that people took notice in the 1800s, and then blossomed in the 1900s. You know, well, that's several hundred years. It took it our first 100 years just to get going. This information revolution that we've got, this information, it's just going to take that long. We're not going to be 300-400 years getting this thing to blossom, going up. This is now everything moving faster. Everything's accelerated. This thing went from nobody heard of an internet 40 years ago. What was that? Nobody heard of a personal computer 40 years ago. What was that? Yeah, even have on record the guy who was running, who was the president of IBM at the time, saying, "Oh, personal computers is just a fad, it'll go away." Yeah, it's not important. There's nothing anybody really needs a computer for out there in their house or something. It's a fad, it will go away. Well, he obviously didn't have the right picture. So we have a lot of technology that's growing very quickly. Yes, we probably will end up with computers with enough speed and enough software that a conscious computer, the computer's not really conscious anymore, and our bodies are conscious, but a computer that can be, whose choices can be made by consciousness, is probably going to happen in our lifetime. Probably even my lifetime. I'm 71. You see, next 20 years, maybe next 30 years, who knows? But we're likely to see that. A lot of changes are going to come. When that comes, suddenly the understanding of consciousness and how it works is going to grow immediately. We've got this thing, No Man's Sky, we're talking about. The idea of virtual reality is suddenly going to grow, and everybody's going to see how that works, and it won't be so hard to sell to tell people how that works, because they'll have played the game and they'll see it and they'll know how it works. It'll be part of what they grew up with. You see, changes are coming fast, and a lot of these changes, I think, are very, very good. It's things we have to go through. We can't stay in the past. These are things, challenges for us. But now, in the Industrial Revolution, we had some really bad stuff started out too. You know, in the beginning, it was very abusive. The people who had lots really abused the people who had nothing. You know, we hear reports, I don't know how true they are, but reports of, children were chained to their machines so to make sure they would come back. They didn't let them go, that kind of thing. Well, child labor, that got laws passed against that. We grow it up, it gets more civilized, and now, the Industrial Revolution's kind of already come and gone with us. It's just coming other places, but it's a kinder, gentler kind of thing than it was when it first started. I think the information age is going to be that way too. I think in the beginning, it's like Wild West. You know, whatever you can grab and hold, you know, that's yours. So we're going to see abuses of the internet. We're going to see abuses of information technology. That's just the way it's going to be. But I don't think those abuses are going to erase the, you know, the good potential that we have. Now with kids putting chips under their skin, I don't know about that. I'm not familiar with that. I'm familiar with putting chips under dog skin so people can identify them with numbers. One day though, it may be more convenient to have a chip put somewhere back here behind your ear rather than to carry around a cell phone. And we now have prosthetics that you can put on a stump that actually your mind can control. We have prosthetics that can go in your head that your mind can control for your eye, for vision, connected to your brain, bypass the damaged optic nerve. Okay, there's things like that that are coming out of technology, and some of those are going to be integrated into the human body. In other words, we're going to start taking on the appearance of cyborgs, right? Which is mean part human, part machine. First, it'll be just people who lost limbs and lost vision and that kind of thing, but eventually there may be advantages that people who haven't lost limbs might want to use. I don't know, you know, how can we tell what happens 200 years from now? You see, it's hard to say exactly where any of this could take. But I can see that there are pits too. We get movies about the downfalls of these kinds of things. There's any number of movies where the computer tried to, you know, take over the earth and kill all the people, right? And we have movies about how people used genetics and cloning to make the more powerful, important humans that could, you know, faster, smarter, stronger, whatever, and then these people all get together and want to take everything over. So, of course, in our movies, it's all about good versus evil, and it's all about fighting because that's what our culture supports in its literature and movies. So there are potentials for bad things to happen, for abuses to happen, but I think that as these abuses happen, they will probably be seen as abuses fairly quickly because things happen fast now. It'll spread fast, the abuse will be fast, and it'll be observed, it'll be crashed, and it'll be taken down, and it won't be abusive. So I think we'll see them. I think we'll see them grow. You know, we could probably make a case for the internet's #1 product, of course, is pornography. You know, we could make a case for that being kind of abusive. But there it is, and you know, it's we the people. You know, what's out there is what we demand, it's what we want. So again, it's us to grow up. So I think there'll be abuses, but I believe those abuses will be seen as abuses. I believe they will be righted. If there's things that you put in your head or in chips and they turn out to be control mechanisms or something, I think they will be gotten rid of, and that'll be done. I have a sense that good will triumph over evil. And I think in the long run, that will. And the reason I think that it will is that that is the nature of this reality. We are here to grow up and become love. That's evolution. And you can go backwards in evolution sometimes, but not for all that long. Evolution is relentless. Evolution never stops. So we could all have a world war and blow us all back to the Stone Age, but 1,000 years later, we'd be right up here chugging along again, you see. We'd regroup, and we'd regroup faster this time than we did last time. And we'd then keep on going. There can be setbacks, but in the long run, we're going to make it. And I'm hopeful that that big step in making it toward a more cooperative, caring, empathetic people and humanity isn't that far off. I'm thinking it could happen in, you know, the earliest possibility is probably like several decades. I suspect it'll happen in the next 100 years anyway, that we'll get there, because we're getting closer. We've got the technology to care about each other, to really care, to relate to people. And as that spreads and gets ubiquitous, it'll be better as we grow up and see our mistakes and realize that we are the problem. Not them, but we are the problem. That'll help. So I see it all getting better, and I see it getting better at a faster rate than what it ever has before, because that's the nature of the better it gets, the easier it is to get better. It accelerates. So yes, I think there are needs for concern. There are needs for people to think about what we're doing. Do we really want to clone people and make them smarter and faster and whatever, and what's the point of that? Well, you see, there's really no point, in the sense that the point of being here is to grow up. Being faster, smarter doesn't help you grow up any, so why would you want to do that? That's something that kind of is going off in the wrong direction. We can grow up just fine the way we are. It's all about our evolution as consciousness, not about how fast and smart we are. Faster and smarter doesn't make you more grown up or even more prone to grow up. That's different. It doesn't take a big intellect to grow up. It takes caring. It takes love. It takes interest in other people. That's what it takes, and that doesn't come with IQ. It comes with something else. So yeah, I think we could make mistakes. I think we could mess up, and it may even be a big mess up, but I think eventually we'll overcome whatever those mistakes are, and that we will prevail, and we will end up being cooperative, and we will end up being more united, a kinder, gentler place. And I think it could be in the near term, next 100 years, maybe next 50 years, who knows? I don't think it'll be long term, because the pace is picking up. We're not going to take 300 years to do the cycle of this information age. It's coming on fast. I mean, just look how much we've changed in 20 years, 30 years. It's a whole different world out there. I mean, what was life like before cell phones? Can you remember? What was life like before cell phones, before computers, before you could Google something to find out? You needed to know about something. Well, what were you going to do? Buy an encyclopedia, go to the library, ask a friend. What were your options? Well, now, within 30 seconds, you've got not only the answer, but 6 answers from different places, from different opinions about what that answer to that question is. Well, that's quick. So I don't think we should be too frightened of the unknown. The unknown can be a scary thing, but I don't think we should let the unknown frighten us too much. I think we kind of, what it was in Star Trek, go boldly forth, where no man has gone before. Well, that's what our future is. It's where we've never been before. But I think we kind of have to just march off there and do our best. And if we do that, I think eventually it'll all come out just fine, because evolution is relentless and never gives up. So I'm very hopeful and very positive about it. But I share your concern that we can make some big mistakes that will set us back, but they'll only set us back. They won't stop us. So with a bigger picture view, I'm very positive and hopeful that it'll be fine, and that we will find our errors and correct them before they do very much damage. It could be wrong, but that's just the way I kind of see things going on. So I'm very positive about our new technology and our ability to correct our own errors, because we're growing up, and we're kind of growing up quickly. We can't grow up too soon. It's been, we've been working on this a long time, and it's only been the last 200 or 300 years that we've really shown a lot of promise. It's pretty much been, barbarian style existence up into what, 1500s, 1600s, and in 2 or 3 million years we've been evolving. That's nothing. That's just yesterday. So we're making a lot of progress. Yes. No, you keep going.
I want to ask, just jumping off of that then, jumping off from that and then kind of referring to a question I asked you yesterday. All right, if we've been in that barbaric state for this long, how do you explain the megalithic sites, Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids? That wasn't done by people that were
No, we were.
So what happened to that knowledge? What happened to that really technological knowledge that existed back then?
Okay. Well, there's 2 things. When I was talking about that we've kind of been barbaric, I wasn't really talking about our science so much. Of course, that's been kind of small too back in those times, but I was talking about us as growing consciousness. We've been basically violent, fear-based cultures for 1 million years or so, and it's only been in the last, I don't know, 500 years, give it a little longer time, that we've been quickly coming out of that. So that's what I meant by that. But we talk about technology. There have been there's been some amazing technology done, like building the pyramids. How do a bunch of primitive people lift, 500-ton rocks up in the air and sit them on top of a pyramid? Well, there's been lots of people try to explain it different sorts of ways. And, some would say that if you read, Zachariah Stitchin? Yeah, Stitchin. He has an explanation that the people that are on a planet that comes through here every 3,500 years or something, had something to do with that. Other people would say that it was psychic powers, those rocks were levitated up there. And there's lots of different ways that you can, make conjecture about how that happened. I have seen things that I say I have no idea how that might have happened in a physical sense, like crop circles you brought up. You say, how could, like a bunch of farmers with brooms, in 6 hours create a 15-acre pattern that's down to, inches in accuracy in the dark? You say, that's not a good answer, farmers with brooms, no. Make some people feel better, but that's hard to swallow. But what I do when I get to those kinds of places, and how did they get those rocks up there in the pyramid? I've watched movies that showed how they built ramps and how they had, lots of slaves and how they did this and that, and they slid them up the ramps. And I'm not real convinced with that either. That didn't seem real convincing to me. It's like, maybe possible, but that's kind of unlikely. So I just leave it in the, I don't know, open-minded but skeptical. I have no real thought about where these mysterious things come from, other than could be there, and as a result of the larger consciousness system giving us a reality is bigger than you think. So I'm going to plant this mystery here that you can't explain right in the middle of it, so that you'll realize that your explanation just isn't big enough. Your view of the world is just too small to take this in, and that ought to be a good lesson for you. A little humbling. Now, we have no idea how that pyramid got there. Well, maybe we don't know everything. That's kind of a lesson we need to have. So I can see the system leaving some artifacts like that for us to wonder about. And other than that, that's just kind of a wild, reach your hand up in the air and grab out an answer. I don't know. So I can't explain to you where those things come from, but I don't think that it's a problem in any sense. There's just a lot of things in my reality that I don't really understand, and you just accept that that's the way it is, and maybe you'll get some more information later. So yes, I think things are getting better. I think we have been, from the consciousness viewpoint, we have been barbarians, and that's because that's just was the nature of our environment. The nature of the environment was, to the cave people, to the people even before they harnessed fire. It was it was just survive any way you can. It wasn't about let's all sit around, hold hands, and sing kumbaya, around the fire and be nice to each other. It was, how can you survive? What can you do to survive? And if that meant you took stuff away from somebody else because that helped you to survive, that's the way it was. Very violent times, very violent environments. Weren't a lot of people, weren't cities, weren't no services. No fire truck came out and put out the fire at your house. It was tough times. So people were rough and people were violent. They lived in very rough and violent conditions. Well, since that time, things have changed a lot. Things have really changed, and they're accelerating and changing even faster now. So I don't know how some of those structures and things came, but however it is, maybe I'll find out something definitive someday. But I think it's okay. Whatever it is what it is. Whether Stitchin is right and the people go around on the 9th planet, put them there, it doesn't matter. People came from the stars and put them there. It really doesn't matter either. That's all physical process. That's the physical explanation for how they got there. What happens physically, what happens in this virtual reality, is really not all that important. It's how you deal with it, how you interact with it. What does it mean to you? It's your consciousness quality that's important. So whether stitching's right or not is, I see, only a tiny little fact that really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. It's the same reason when you say, well, how do I know that I'm talking to that being and it's really them and not me? And the point is, it really doesn't matter. Is it useful? So it really doesn't matter where some of these things came from. They're here. We deal with them. We interact with them. We wonder about them. But they're just mysteries, and it'll remain so until we know more. Not a problem.
Tom, can you comment on randomness, probability, and predestination? How they interact and which one predominates if it does?
Okay. Okay, could you say that again with the mic on? Yeah. Talk right into the, there we go. Yeah, big voice.
Probability and predestination, how they interact, and which one predominates and when.
Okay, yes. Randomness and probability and predestination. Okay, the first thing to note is that randomness and probability are related, and neither of those is related to predestination. If you have predestination, then you do not have randomness, nor do you have probability. You have predestination. Everything just is and is going to be that way, and there's nothing you can do to change it. It's predestined. Okay, so predestination is incompatible with either probability or randomness. Now, randomness and probability are related in the sense that probability is about uncertainty. If you don't have uncertainty, then you don't have any probability. You have probabilities because there's various things that could happen, and what are the probability that each one might? So what's the probability that this will happen? Well, if you have predestination, there is no uncertainty. It's just predestined. Without any uncertainty, there's no probability. All right? Randomness creates uncertainty because there's no knowing what will happen if it's random. That's the definition of random, means that you just don't know. You're going to pick a number between 1 and 10, and it's random, and, well, what's that number going to be? Well, you don't know because it's random, you see. So the random creates uncertainty. Randomness creates uncertainty. Probability then deals with that uncertainty to tell you what the probabilities are. Just how uncertain is it? This is more uncertain than that. And predestination is totally incompatible with either one of those. Now, what it has to do with this subject is that our reality, okay, has statistical and probabilistic function. It's the way it is. A statistical reality, a statistical simulation, statistics and probability, that is very efficient. It's a very efficient way of making a simulation. Now, there is one problem with making a statistical simulation, and that is you need to know what the probability distributions are for things to happen. So you can model something really well with probability and statistics if you know what the probability distributions are. If you don't and you're guessing, then your statistical and probability model is chancy. It's only as good as the distributions you base it on. So by probability distribution, I mean you have to know how uncertain is it. How much more uncertain is this than that? You have to know these things, because otherwise, if you don't know those, then you'll do it wrong. Things that are improbable will happen, and things that are probable won't, because you really don't know what's probable and what's not probable. Well, in our situation, this is a virtual reality. Everything in it is computed. If everything in this is computed, then the system is in the perfect position to compute all the statistical possibilities and probabilities. So it knows exactly what the probability distributions are. Simple example I give sometimes is fire a cannon. Cannon's a simple machine, very simple machine. It's a tube, it's a ball, you put powder in the end of the tube, you have a way to get fire to the powder, with a fuse. You put the ball in after the powder. When the powder goes boom, creates a lot of pressure between the ball and the back of the cylinder, and that pressure shoves the ball out. It's a cannon. Very, very simple machine. All right, now if we look at that and say, well, let's model that deterministically. The way you model that deterministically, if you really want to do a good job, you start with atoms. If you want to do even better job, you start with elementary particles, electrons, quarks, little things like that. Well, we'll just start with atoms. That's good. And you have to have all the atoms that's inside that gun barrel, because that makes all the difference in the world. And all the atoms that are in that gunpowder, and when the fire hits, how does that gunpowder burn exactly? How does that pressure form? How does that ball start to go out? The ball isn't perfect. If it was, it would never, it wouldn't just perfectly match that barrel. There's little spaces and things, and some of the gases will escape and some won't. And as they do that, the ball will turn and twist and get jammed in there sometimes, and there's all these things that are going on. And actually that problem, that simple problem, is too hard for a modern supercomputer to compute. There's too much going on, too many molecules, too many atoms. If you start at the atomic level, you can't solve the problem. You'd need 100 supercomputers to compute all those atoms and all their interactions and all the materials. That gun barrel isn't just steady. It actually warps when that ball goes through. It flaps. Lots of things change. Everything's expanding under the heat. I mean, you got hundreds of variables that you have to keep track of. It's a very hard problem. But now let's model that thing statistically. Well, you put a ball in a cannon, you fire it, it goes someplace. Bang, it makes a whole little dent in the ground. All right, you measure that. You do that now 100,000 more times, and you look where all the dents are. And then you make up a probability distribution, you see? Now, you've done that all because you've simulated. It's a virtual cannon, virtual cannonball, virtual gunpowder, virtual fire, all this been computed. So it's real easy for the system that computes all that virtual stuff to compute it firing 100,000 times. It can do that in milliseconds. Simple. Milliseconds. So it does that. And when it's done, it has probability distribution. And now, when anybody fires that cannon, you reach into that distribution, you pick out an answer, and that's where the cannonball lies. It requires almost no computational resources. If you do it deterministically, every time that cannon fires, it's a whole new problem. Because once it's fired once, the interior of that barrel isn't the same anymore. Every time you put the powder in, it lies differently. Every time you light that fuse, it burns in a different way, and it lights that powder, which ignites in a different way. That barrel wears every time a ball goes through it. The problem is different. So you've got an impossible computer problem that takes huge amounts of supercomputers to solve every single time you fire a cannon bullet, because that's determinism. Probabilistic, one time you have to calculate all that stuff, and at a detailed level. You may calculate it at a very detailed level, but it depends on the use of that. Let's say the use of that is in a Civil War cavalry raid or something, and cannon's part of it. Well, the fact that a ball lands here and not there, totally unnoticeable. Nobody notices. Nobody says, wait a minute, stop the war. That cannonball was 6 inches away from where it should have hit. You see, nobody cares. So the probability distribution doesn't have to be any better than it takes for the use that it's being put to. Plus or minus 10 feet, it's fine. You can calculate those kind of distributions very fast, you see. And after that, it's just a draw from the probability distribution. So if you're going to model something like this cannon, that's going to be, there's 1,000 cannons, and they're all firing a ball every minute, another ball comes out of them. You can't have 1,000 supercomputers, for every shot that the cannon makes, whatever. It's just unreasonable. But you can take 1,000 draws out of a random number distribution in less than a whole millisecond. It's trivial. So you see, that's the difference. A deterministic science, a deterministic world, if this is an objective reality and everything is from the ground up, right? Atoms make the molecules, molecules make the stuff, stuff does all the stuff, and you have to model it like that. It doesn't work. It's an inefficient computer science solution for the problem. nature's efficient. Larger conscious system is efficient because it's evolved to be that way. That's why we have a statistical probabilistic simulation. And you don't need any more detail than the result requires. So plus or minus 6 feet on a cannonball is plenty good. But now if you're going to get somebody to study that cannon aerodynamically and they're going to set up a laser system to trace the ball, and well, now maybe plus or minus an inch is what you need to model that. And if they're going to do it even more, well, you may have to do it even more, but that's just a few times. That's like having to do this, thousands of times every day, in some kind of big conflict. So yes, you do have to do detailed calculations. You do have to do them to get your probability distributions, but you have to do them once. And then maybe you modify it a little bit. So you can modify that for barrel wear, or modify that for something. It doesn't really matter because where these things hit isn't that important. You see, but you can't actually even get the cannonball out of the gun doing the grounds up, deterministic method unless you start with every atom that's in play. Can't even get the barrel out of the gun.
It's possible, but it wouldn't be efficient.
Exactly. The deterministic it's theoretically possible, it's just not efficient. It's not an efficient process. It doesn't make any sense when you can get as good a process. You get the same result for a billionth of the trouble. So it's just a matter of parsimony in the system, of being efficient. That's all. It's the same thing with many worlds. Okay, we have in physics, we have a many worlds description, and the reason there's a many worlds description is because scientists are stuck. They've painted themselves into this corner with determinism. Because this is a material world, it has to have a causal relationship. It's objective. Therefore, everything has its cause and everything's objective. Well, if that's the case, you can't have free will. How can you have free will when everything, if I knew the location of every atom on the universe and its velocity at time t, I can calculate where this universe is and everything in it from then on. See, that's a belief in determinism, that everything works from the ground up. That's the way physics sees the world. Okay, now, so when they realize through quantum mechanics that chance and probability play, right? It's a probability wave function. They know now that the world has this probability in it, but they're determinists. That's a problem. Well, one of the solutions to that problem, how do you be a determinist and still let change and choice be in the world? Well, the answer was, whenever anything changes, let's start a whole new universe. Every time something changes. Okay, so I decide to, do this instead of that. A whole new universe has to start where I did this instead of that. And you'd say, well, that's not a very significant change. Why would you start a whole universe for that? Well, if you don't, you have to think that it's not deterministic, because, all right, let's say this universe is smart and it knows that that's not an important change. Well, how did it do that? Who decided it was not an important change? Well, if you're a determinist, you can't answer that question, who decided that wasn't an important enough change to start another universe, so you're stuck. Every change has to start a new universe. Otherwise, you'd have to say there was some intelligence that was making a decision on when a new universe went up, and that doesn't fit. Okay, so that's a big problem. But now you have an even bigger problem. Every time some electron, how many electrons do we have in the universe? Well, that would be a pretty big number. Every time one of those little electrons flips its state from this way to that way, a whole new universe has to go, because that's a change, you see. Every time any of us sneezes or suppresses a sneeze, a whole new universe. You see how impractical it gets? And to answer your comment, it's not impossible. It's just unreasonable. It's not efficient.
And highly unlikely.
And therefore, highly unlikely. Yeah, we have some basic rules in science. One of them is Occam's razor. It says it needs to be simple, it needs to be elegant, and it needs to be efficient. Otherwise, it's not likely to be fundamental. That's Occam's razor. It's just a philosophical point because everything that we found that's fundamental is very elegant, simple, and efficient. That's the way nature works. That's the way the system works. So this thing about making all these universes, all these parallel universes, is just the opposite. It is inelegant, it's brute force, it's inefficient, it's wasteful beyond imagination, you see. So it's just not likely. It's not impossible. It's just kind of silly. So that's kind of the answer, is that it's a probabilistic and statistical simulation because that's reasonable. That's something that can be done. That takes smaller amount of resources. Not that the other's impossible, it just doesn't make any sense. So determinism says you can't have any probability, you can't have any statistics. Everything already is. There's no free will. There is no choice. You just are hallucinating that you have free will. You're being tricked into thinking you have free will because for some reason you just do whatever it is you're supposed to do in this deterministic thing, and there's nothing that you can change. Everything is the way it's supposed to be, and there's no changing it. Well, our experience just isn't like that. We know we make choices, and we know the choices we make change things. We know if we had married Susie instead of Sally, our life would have been different. We don't know whether it had been better or worse, but we know it would have been different. You see, if we'd have done different things, we get different results, and we know that. So our own experience tells us that that's nonsense, that there is no choice and there is no free will.
So there is no fate.
Hmm?
So there is no fate.
There is no fate, there is only probability. Yes, there's probable fate. There may be a very high probability that such and such will happen, and you might call that fate, but there is no fate that that must happen. There's only probability and possibility. And if you put enough energy into modifying future probability a particular way, and it comes out the way you've been working on it, you may call that fate, but it's just you putting energy into the system to create the reality that you want. You are modifying, yeah, you're putting intent, and by that intent, you're modifying future probability. But that's not fate, that's you doing that, you see? And it depends on how well you can do it and how many other people are pulling in the opposite direction. So there is no fate. It seems like that because our existence is very, very complicated. We all interact with each other. So when this stuff happens, it's like, well, what's the causal chain? Where did that come from? Why did that happen that way? And if you look at it, it may seem very improbable, and you may be tempted to say, well, that was just fate. But what it was just luck, or bad luck, whichever. It's just the way the cookie crumbles in this world of all of us making choices that interact with each other. And how that comes out, nobody knows, which is the beauty of it. That's why it's so effective, because then we have choices to make. So that's, there is no fate. There is one thing. What do we have? How much time do we have here? 14, 15, so you've got 2 hours, right? About 2 hours. Okay, we'll just go on. There was a request that we talk about primal male, primal female, and I know some people wanted to hear that. So I don't want to just run out of time and say, oh, shucks, we didn't get to talk about that, because I know people asked about it.
What?
Primal male, primal female.
You're writing a book, aren't you?
I'm writing a book with that title. I've been writing it for about 20 years. And it's been a long time, but it'll be a few more years too, because I'm busy doing other things, and I'm kind of still thinking about it, still doing research and so on. So it's not quite time yet. You have to wait till the timing is right before you do these things. If you do them out of the right time, then they don't have any effect. So I am doing that. And there were, 4 or 5 people? How many people want me to talk about that? Is that? All right, that'll answer a lot of questions then all at once. So maybe I should just take a little time to do that before we go on with questions, and then we'll see. We'll have more time. It's not going to take me 2 hours to do that. It'll take me a lot less. Half an hour should do. Okay. Primal male, primal female. It's an idea I had about 20 years ago or so, that it was a subject that needed to be talked about and that there were an awful lot of people who needed a little, I don't know, a little help in that area. Very much the same thing that brought me to my big toe for writing that. There was a lot of people searching, a lot of people wondering how things worked. There's a lot of people who were wasting their time in acquisition, and it's all about me. Not because they're bad people, but they just didn't understand the nature of the reality and how it worked. And it would be really good to put something out like that because it would be useful to lots of people. Well, I feel the same way about this book about gender. There's so much confusion in the land about gender and what it means and what is it and how do we deal with it. And, you know, the war between the sexes, that's a sad thing. Anyway, we have all of that going on in our Western society, not so much in our Eastern society, but whatever we do in the West ends up in the East, you know, some years later. So we've got all this dysfunction raging, and I've been thinking for about 20 years that I need to try to do something there that would be helpful to people. And you know, who am I to do that? I'm some physicist that does consciousness, right? And what does that have to do with gender? Well, the only thing it really has to do with gender is that what I want to do is look at gender issues without cultural overlay. Take all the cultural overlay off of it, you know, all the things the culture tells us about that, and set that aside, and let's just look at what it is that's male and female, hence the thing primal male, primal female. The primal just means without an overlay of social constraint or social belief, whatever you say. And I have some facility to do that in that, you know, I'm not much of a member of our culture anymore. I kind of been outside the culture for a long time. So I kind of look at it from eyes that aren't like that aren't really too much acculturated to some extent. And I have an ability to kind of see what people are thinking and what's really going on inside of them at a feeling level. More than what they might want to divulge, and I do that just to collect information. So between those two things, I've got a little bit of a sense of how things work. Now, it may or may not be right, but I'm hoping it'll be useful. I'm hoping people will get something out of it that will jog them or bump them and help them deal with this mess we've gotten into with gender. All right, so that's what it's all about. And I have on my website, if you go to my website, and there is a button there that will take you to, I don't know what it says, but anyway, eventually it'll take you to where there's slides, I think, are one of the things from previous talks and whatever. And also there's a little file down there that's the primal man, primal woman, and it's just kind of the logical backbone of it. It's not even the whole skeleton, but it's kind of the logical backbone. And I wrote it a year or two ago because somebody said, what about that book? Tell us about that book. We want to know what you're thinking about gender. So I thought, all right, I'll write some down just to give you an idea of where it's going and what it's about. So you'll find about 20 pages there. That is not all the subjects I'm going to cover. It's just the logical backbone of it. And you can go read that.
Excuse me. May I add something to that? There is a video of you, interview of you, and if people are interested, they can YouTube it. Just in YouTube, type Tom Campbell, primal female, primal male, and then the video pops up. It's 1.5 hours. And my own experience, as soon as I employed the instructions in that video, my relationship improved a lot.
Yeah. So there's several videos. I've talked about it 2 or 3 times. I didn't know I talked about it that long, but I talked about it several places. Maybe I'm going to need 2 hours. Yeah, my nature isn't to short discussions. But anyhow, yeah, I did it not that long ago. It was in an interview, I think, with a Canadian from Toronto, with Laurie Houston. Yeah, Avita. Yeah.
In Toronto.
Yeah, I did one with Avita. I also did one with Laurie.
Yes.
Yeah, both Canadians. And the one with Laurie was only about a month or 2 ago. one of the Vita was much longer. Anyway, so you can find some stuff out there, but I'll just give you the basics. Okay, if we look at our instincts, human beings are animals like any other animal. We evolved here under the same rule set that dogs and cats and monkeys did. You know, we are an animal, and we have instincts just like all the animals have instincts. We just don't like to admit that because we think we're better than the animal. We're something special. There's all the lower animals, and then there's humans, you know, we're really neat, cool people who are so much better than all the other animals. But we also are driven by instinct. And these instincts aren't just little remains of something long ago that somehow just tickle us now and then. Our life is how can we say, it modifies our choices. Our daily choices in life are modified by these instincts. They help make us who we are. They're very powerful forces in our being. And we need to understand these as part of being human. And most instincts will center around two things in this virtual reality. And that's the two things that drive our system's entropy. That is survival and procreation. If you're good at survival and procreation, then you're good at this virtual reality, you know, this physical reality that's virtual. So those are the key things that are important, and most of our instincts follow with that. So survival and procreation, you might think that may have a lot to do with male and female. Well, it does. So that's where the core of our instincts lie. So we go back to long ago where we had early hominids, and that's another little advantage I have because I can kind of go back there and look at that database. So that's why a physicist who also does consciousness might be writing a book on gender, for what that's worth. Anyway, you go back to early human beings, and you will find that it was a very hard life. It was very unsure even whether the species would make it or not. There were times when the species could have been snuffed out, and there would have been no humans. It wasn't like it was a sure bet. We weren't all that good at survival or procreation, it seemed. Well, we evolved some strategies that gave us a leg up on that survival and procreation criteria that made us different from our cousin, who was really a different species than us, and that was Neanderthal. They were a subspecies, you know, both hominids, but just a different subspecies. So we had a different strategy than they did, and one of the differences that seemed to make the most difference in how reality worked out was that we came across the strategy. Again, this is just evolution. It's not like we all thought down and came up with this idea and then everybody did it. It's just, this is what worked. So what works in evolution goes forward, and what doesn't work in evolution goes away. So it's just a natural thing, but I talk about it like we figured it out. Anyway, it was that the important thing, the most important ingredient in our survival as a species and the survival at the next level down of the tribe, if you will, and the next level down of the individual was numbers. Numbers was the big thing. If you're going to survive as a species, it needs to be a lot of you. There's only 2 or 3, you don't have very high probability. You need numbers. Okay. We evolved a strategy that females were to produce babies. It's what they're made for, right? Their baby production is their thing. And in order for that to have its most efficient impact, they needed not to be doing other sorts of things. So where you had Neanderthals, where the males and the females were not of the same size, males were a little bigger, but they were more of comparable size. You didn't have the differentiation. As best we can tell, everybody did everything. So if there was a fight going on, then the females and the males all picked up their rocks or whatever they were doing in those days and, you know, headed off to battle. And if they were doing other things and they all did that, it was more of an egalitarian where everybody did everything. And the humans had this clever idea of the women are to have babies. You need to protect them. You need to provide for them. And you need to protect the children and provide for them. That's the key. So we had kind of a split in jobs. We had the men who were the ones that had the task of doing the providing and doing the protecting. We had the females who were to take care of those children because, you know, they didn't go to the grocery store and get a bottle, you know, or anything. You know, they had children. They probably for a long time didn't even know why they got pregnant or how. That was probably something that dawned on them later. We're talking way back early, you know, perhaps a million years before fire even, you know. So this is when all these instincts start, okay? So they were to be provisioned and protected so they could have their babies, take care of the babies could grow up and you'd have more human beings. The men were to go out into the world, find shelter, find food, and protection. Now, there were other things that the biggest enemy the humans had were probably other humans after a while. And what was important to other humans? Survival, right? Procreation. So if you were a tribe and you saw another tribe that had some stuff you could use, well, it's your survival versus their survival, you'd take it. If they were in nice comfy caves and you didn't have any and you could take them, you'd take them. Well, what made the difference? Who won and who lost? Numbers. It was all about numbers. If you had more numbers, then you were the winner because everybody had the same technology, you know, rocks and sticks. Maybe pointy sticks. Maybe eventually even pointy sticks with little sharp rocks on the ends of them, but still, everybody was basically equal there. The difference was numbers. Women were valuable. Men were expendable. Okay. So, if there's this altercation and numbers are the key to success, then the way you worked is that what was the prize? Well, the prize might have been their cave, the prize might have been their stuff, but the big prize was their women, because those women then became your women and they made babies that became your warriors and your girls and whatever. So the numbers game meant women were the prize. You took care of them, you fed them, you kept their children safe, and you protected them. And you would fight at any case to keep them yours and within your tribe, because when the other tribe decided they wanted your stuff and they wanted your women, they didn't want your men because they would be not too happy about, you know, being taken over like that. So all the men and boys gone because they're expendable, because it doesn't take one man to keep one woman pregnant. One man can keep a whole lot of women pregnant. So it didn't matter that the women would soon outnumber the men in the successful tribes. They'd all be kept pregnant and producing more babies all the time. So that's how we grew up. That's the basic of our instincts. Women are intrinsically valuable because they give birth. Men are intrinsically dispensable because their value is utilitarian. How good are they at getting provisions? How good are they in protecting the women? That's their value. When they're not good at that anymore, or if they never were good at that, or if some other tribe has more people in it, they're gone. They're expendable. They're only good until they can't do that anymore. Well, another tribe comes and takes all the women, and those women, they're not slaves and treated badly. They're just women in that tribe, making babies for that tribe. They just integrate into the tribe. And if you're female, that's just part of life. You're part of the spoils of battle. You go with the winners, which is exactly where you want to be, because the winners will keep you safe. You want to be a part of a big tribe. If your tribe's the biggest tribe around, then you're safe there. There's not going to be uprooted and changed, whatever. That's a good place to be. It's not like that's a terrible place to be. Okay, that's actually a better place to be. So that's what's in our instincts. That's the beginning of our instincts. And those instincts then continued on with our evolution. So we have a disparity of duties here. Okay? Men do the outside work, and they're masters of the outside world. Women stay where it's safe. You're not going to let your woman go out and walk around in the bushes where somebody can, hurt her, or an animal can get her, or something else. She's valuable. Keep her home where she's safe. So we had the women who did the inside work, if you will. They stayed where it was safe. They took care of the children, kept the children where it was safe. They didn't have to be as big. Women are much smaller in our species than our men, because there was no point in them consuming any more resources than they needed. You need extra food. If your women are all 200 pounds, then they're going to eat more food. So little women, bigger men. You need bigger men because they have to protect, they have to fight. You need smaller women. They have to still be big enough to have babies, but that's about it. They need to take care of children. So in our species, there was more of a change in size. Women became more focused on their attention to children. Instead of everybody takes care of the children, you have children and they just belong to the tribe and everybody takes care of them. Women took care of the children. Men took care of the outside work. So we talk about dominance. Women were dominant with the children and with taking care of that family, if you will. And the man, of course, was part of their family. That was their dominance. Men were dominant in the outside world. And this specialization, shall we say, that's how it is. You specialize in one thing. Well, there was the specialization. So men grew up worried about the outside world, fighting, survival, getting the tools that they needed. And men's idea about sexuality was that you'd make any woman pregnant who would let you. If she got to say no, she always had the choice to say no, because otherwise, instead of the men working together, the men would be fighting with each other. So to keep the men from fighting with each other, rather than fighting with whoever the bad guys were, the women got to say no. So it was always her choice. That way the men wouldn't fight. Otherwise it's, my woman, no, it's my woman, and then there's a fight, now there's two less men. So that wasn't good, okay? So that was kind of a sacred part that a woman always had the choice. She could always say no, unless she just got captured from another group of people, but then once she got integrated into that tribe, she still had those same kind of ideas. You didn't bully women, you took care of them. So men's sexual attitudes grew up that if a woman says yes, if she's available, you have sex with her. Not particularly particular or particularly choosy. When the opportunity arises, that's what you do. That's the way men are put together. Women are put together so that they consider, can he take care of me? Can he protect me? Is it worth me investing the 9 months that it'll take, to have his child and have him take care of me? Is that a good investment? Or can I make a better investment someplace else? Her choice. So women didn't have the same attitudes that men had towards sexuality. They looked at it from a very practical sense of how it was going to affect the rest of their life. Men were more indiscriminate in that, see, both are trying to do the same thing in a different way. The way you grow, the way you maximize your survival and procreation is you want your genetic material to go forward into the future. You want your children to go into the future and have children who have children, and therefore your genetic material needs to go forward. That's what everybody's trying to do. Well, this is optimized. Okay, the men in that scenario, the only way their genetic material is going to go forward is if the children that their women bear survive and those children survive. So if the men want their genetic material to go forward, they got to protect those women and those children. Now, if they want their genetic material to go forward, it's a good idea for them to impregnate as many women as they can. the more they can get pregnant, the more likely their genetic material is going to go forward. The only way the female's genetic material is going to go forward is if she survives and her children survive. And the way she survives is to have a good man who can protect her and provision her and take care of those kids. Because if that happens and the kids go forward, then her genetic material goes forward. Okay? So this is, you can kind of see how we're ending up with a lot of the roles that we have, and these roles are traditional. These are roles that have been born out since millions and millions of years ago, and we still carry them around today. We're still informed by these same instincts. But now something happened about, again, we got kinder and gentler. Something happened about 300 years ago or so. What happened was we outgrew that phase of our evolution. It got to where the women didn't have to stay hunkered down in this cave where it was safe. They go out and walk around because we didn't live in that same violent place anymore. Things are different. See, the environment changed. And whenever environment changes, evolution's got to make some new decisions and change to catch up with it. So a few hundred years ago, our environment wasn't people, trying to kill each other to take their stuff. It was people getting along. We had cities, we had law. We had still a lot of violent stuff going on, but basically it got to the point that it was getting kinder and gentler. And eventually, as we go from the 1700s to the 1800s to the 1900s, pretty soon women can get out of that cave, walk around, go shopping, do all sorts of things, and do it in relative safety, and go back home again, and it's not a big deal. No saber-toothed tigers, no foreign warriors going to scoop you up and take you back to their cave or anything like that. So now we have a different environment. And we have this different environment. We need to change a little bit about how we interact. But we've got these instincts, you see. And these instincts are there. And you don't just change an instinct on a dime. You need to work with the instinct. And the problem is that when your culture tells you to do this and your instinct tells you to do that, what happens is neurosis, anxiety, fear, feelings of inadequacy. All of these things start to blossom up. You have all these emotional, mental health problems start to come up because you've got instincts saying this is what's right, this is what you need to do, and you've got other things saying, no, not that, you're not like that at all. These other things is what you have to do. Now, women and men are perfect for their roles, and they've evolved to be that way. We say that, women have another property that men don't have. Women have a property of what's called same group preference. In other words, women get along with, like, and need relationships with other women. Well, if you have a group of women taking care of babies to make sure those babies survive so your material goes on, you form alliances, you form friendships. Something happens to you, somebody else is going to take your babies. Something happens to them, you're going to take their babies. These alliances are very essential for women. Okay, now since women were the ones taken care of, and the men controlled the outside world, and the men were kind of in control of that outside world. When they said time to move, the women didn't say, I like it here. It was time to move because something bad was probably coming and we didn't need to be here. So the men were in charge. And the women wanted the men to be in charge because that's how they were going to survive, because these in-charge men were going to take care of them. You see? So all of these things that, we talk about the evil patriarchy and so on, it's not like that at all. Women have always been taken care of by men. Men have always wanted to take care of the women and protect them. Women have always been special in that they create children. Well, not by themselves, but they bear the children. They produce the children. It makes them a very special entity. Men have been special in that they provide the food and the security. Okay, so you see this dichotomy that I'm building up, and most all of you are saying, yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, I feel that way. That looks like, well, the men don't have this self-group preference. They don't have that. Men don't have to form these relationships with her. Now, men can cooperate. They have to, because if they're going to catch that rabbit, it's going to take 2 or 3 of them, one to scare him up and 2 more to grab him. It takes cooperation. So they can form teams. They can cooperate, and then it's gone. But they don't have the same kind of need and connection that women do. They just don't have that. Why? They're competitive. Why are they competitive? Because if they are better at providing and they are better at protecting, they get their choice of women. They can procreate with a woman that has a higher probability of getting their genetics passed into the future, you see. So that gives them value. So it's very competitive. And you don't form all these real close relationships with people that you're trying to beat competitively. Men compete. They challenge each other. So we don't have that. The men getting together and as men, as a group, coming up with rules, of how to subjugate women is kind of silly, because men don't get together in groups and come up with any kind of rules. Men don't have that same in-group preference that women do. It's not there. They're all lone wolves, if you will, all doing their thing, all trying to rise to the top of the pack, because there's value in that to them, and that's just what they do. And you can see these same instincts if you look at 3-year-olds. That's all there. You can see the whole thing right there. Little boys are running around making noise, crashing things, breaking things into pieces, right, banging things together, and the little girls are playing with their dolls. And it's not because the culture tells them that's what they're supposed to do, it's because that's what feels natural. Okay? So first we need to understand who we are, what our instincts tell us about gender. And then we need to start dealing with this problem of, it's a different world out there. We need to forge some different ways of relating to each other, because the women don't have to stay in a safe cave anymore. The men don't really have to provision them so much anymore, because they can get a job themselves, you see, and so on. So with this change, we have men that really aren't quite sure what it means to be a man anymore, because the protection and provisioning thing's kind of gotten weaker, and women that really don't know what it means to be a woman anymore, because the staying at home, taking care of the children and being protected doesn't seem to have that same need. It didn't have that same ring that it does, but yet we all have the same instincts. So that's where this book is going. It's starting with what is instinctual to us, where we are now, describing on some of our dysfunctional ideas, and seeing where it is we need to go and maybe what we have to do to get there. The change in attitudes, the change in perspectives that will take us to kind of the next phase of male and female. Now this idea that there's this gender war, between the males and the females, that's a very dysfunctional idea. Men and women have always been 2 pieces of a puzzle that just fit together very nicely. The women needed the protection. They needed the provisioning. The children did. The species did. The men had that role. That was their role, and they got good at it. It was the women's role, and they got good at it. See, we had that. We knew exactly who we were, what our role was, what made us feel right with the world. Not so much anymore. But it's still, all that's still there. Women still have those same instincts. Men still have those same instincts. It's just that somehow they don't fit like they used to fit. They're hard to implement. See? So some guy wants to help take care of a woman, so he opens the door for her and she tells him to butt out of her life because she's capable of opening that damn door herself, you see. So there's things in our society, we're getting mixed messages. And the mixed messages are very confusing. And the more confused we get, the more neurotic we get. Sexuality becomes a real interesting but confused topic. And we got all this social overlay on top of it that just confuses us even more. And because relationship is where the rubber meets the road in entropy reduction for consciousness evolution. You see, it's all tied together. It's in that intimate relationship where you really find out where your ego is. You really find out what your fears are. That's the place where it all comes out. That's the place where all those hot buttons are hit that, lights that fuse that explodes that fear, that causes that anger or whatever. It's all in that relationship space. It's how you feel about yourself and how you feel about the other person and how they feel about you. And all of that has to do with your gender and how you relate to each other. So if we let this gender thing confuse us all to the point that males and females don't even know who they are and they don't relate much anymore to each other, and each one looks at the other and says, I don't think so, too much trouble, then we're taking away the number one and best way for them to grow up, which is to form those tight relationships. The second most tight relationship is the relationship you have with your children. That's another ego reducer. Suddenly you're not the center of the world anymore. You see? Now you have this responsibility. You have these kids, and they're the center of your world now. That's a whole new way of looking at life for most people when they first have children. It's a whole new set of responsibilities. It's very sobering and growing for most people. Well, places like Japan and other places in Europe, birth rates are dropping. Marriage rates are dropping. Men don't want to get married. Women don't want to get married. They don't like each other much anymore. They don't have a lot in common anymore. It's struggle. Men don't have their old roles anymore. Women don't have their old roles anymore, you see? And when things aren't right and we're feeling anxious, what we do is find somebody to blame. So we blame each other. Men blame the women blame the men. That deteriorates. So that's kind of the mess that we're in gender-wise. And I'm hoping to bring a little sanity to that problem with a book that kind of explains why we're here, so that men who have their feelings of they need, to take care of a woman, they need to protect and provision, they need to do all that things, and that's important to them. And the woman says, I don't need all that. I want to be my own person. I want to keep my own bank account, have my own stuff to go where I want to, and there's this woman feels like she needs to be independent now. That's part of her right to, getting out of the cave. And she's kind of lost touch with her femininity. He's kind of wondering where the masculinity went. So that's the problem. And I see a lot of heads going up and down like, that seems to fit. Been there in the middle of that struggle. So that's kind of where we are. And my book is probably about 80% done in my head, about 10% done on paper. So it will get there sometime. But that's the core of it. A lot of other details to talk about. We can talk about, I had somebody say, well, let's don't talk about men and women, heterosexual. Talk about the bigger picture, talk about the transsexual and the homosexual and everybody else. Well, my view on that is that this is a statistical probabilistic reality. There are lots of ways that those two sets, 24 chromosomes, can go together, make it somebody that's totally unique. Well, there's this probability curve that says, well, most of the people, as far as their sexual identity goes, will come out into this fat part of the curve. But this curve has tails. It goes all the way out there. So you're going to have all sorts of things actually happen. You're going to have masculine females. You're going to have feminine males. You're going to have all these things are going to take place just because they're possible. All right, they're 1 in 1,000, but 1 in 1,000 relates to millions of people on this planet of 7.5 billion people, you see? So when you throw all these chromosomes together and you take all the chances that are going on, nourishment, physical stuff that's happening, stress, you take all this stuff together, what comes out is statistical. And somebody's going to fall out under that extreme of the curve. Somebody's going to fall under that extreme of the curve. Well, those are and same with the physical body. Some people are going to have physical bodies that are nearly perfect, and some people are going to have some that aren't. Some are going to be born with only one leg. Some are going to be born retarded. It's going to come out all over the place, out under the tails of this curve. But most of us will be here under the fat part of the curve in the middle. That's where the big bulk of people are going to be. Well, all the different sorts of gender identities and so on with the the homosexual and the bisexual and the transgender and so on, all of those are just natural things. They're just natural things that come out in the statistics. It's not, it's not a disease, it's not a failure, it's not a fault, it's just 1 every 10,000 or something gets something strange. Sometimes people are born with mixed genitalia. They're kind of part woman and part man. And sometimes they're born with the body one way and the mind the other way. And it's just like that. That's just all the way. If you throw all this stuff together and shake it up and see how it falls out, most of them's in the middle, but there's some out under the curves. Perfectly natural, but because it's different than what's in the middle, they take a lot of heat and get a lot of trouble for it, because that's the way we are. We're very self-centered, we're herd animals, and anything that's different from us, we fear, and when we fear things, we're not very nice. So that's kind of the idea of where all these other gender issues go. But my book is based mainly for the fat part of the curve, because that's where the big crying need is as far as males and females to realign themselves as absolutely necessary and significant parts of one whole thing, which is what they are. There can't be a war between the genders. There has to be love between the genders. They have to support and complement each other. And we need to forge that complementary relationship in a new environment with new ways of looking at things. And we need to not let go of our roots, because new environments have ways of changing. That's why change is so slow. What if we all changed in a month and then there was huge earthquakes and other things and we went back 300 years, right? Suddenly all the good technology was gone and we didn't have internets anymore, we started living in caves again. Well, we would have changed and wouldn't be adaptable now to the caves. Take us a long time to get back to where we could do that. So change comes slowly for a reason, because over the millions of years, environments have changed. They've come and gone. It's been times when everything was hot. It's been times when everything was glacier. There's been all sorts of times in between. There's been times of famine and there's been times of plenty, and you never really know what's coming around the corner. So change happens slowly. You don't change on a dime, because maybe it's just a passing phase in your environment. But we have to realize that when our attitudes that are culturally done, culturally created, are crosswise with our attitudes that are instinctual, trouble happens. We're not whole people. We don't feel satisfied. We don't feel fulfilled. We feel out of place. Something's not right in our reality. And it's hard to find that peace. It's hard to find that traction even on your own growth, if we can't get something as basic as that together. So yes, our environment's changed, but our instincts are the same. And they're going to stay the same for at least a dozen generations or more. They're going to stay that way for a while. So we've got this transition period. Yes, instincts can be changed, modified, not so much replaced, but modified. That can be done over some generations, but it's not a quick thing. So how do we take our instincts? We can always rearrange our social things. We make those. Those social ideas are our own construction. So we can reform those pretty quickly. Those can change on a dime. And we need to get our social constraints and our instinctual constraints together so that we have peace between the genders. Not only peace, but attraction. We have something really good, because that's important for us as a species. That's really important. We can't do anything else if we've got this division, this gender division going between. That's going to get in the way of everything else we might want to do. We have to come to peace with that first. So that's it for the male-female.
We have coffee breaks. They want to talk about, so there's
Just in time.
We'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll
Okay.
go back and maybe do the rest of the exercises.
Okay, we got 2 healing exercises and we have 4 remote viewing exercises. Okay, they are very similar to what we did last time. Different names, obviously, on the healing. Maybe some pointers, a couple of ways that you can get the remote viewing. These are hard remote viewing targets. Pictures are much harder than objects. These are pictures. Shiny objects are much better than dull objects because they catch your attention more easily. They're a little more dramatic. So it's sort of like fish, you go after shiny objects. But anyway, they're accessible, and I have them here, so if you want to know where they are, they're right in here and they're in order. But they have numbers on them, so we know which one is which. And I will actually look at it while we're doing it, and you can pick it out of my mind. That'll be another way that you can access it. You can also see me showing you the picture after we're done. That's another way to look at it. Okay, so that's getting it out of the future probabilities database rather than the past database from the person who made it and picked the picture. And again, don't necessarily look for pictures, look for architectural elements. Do you see lines? Do you see circles? Do you see 4 or 5 circles? Are the lines going this way or that way or up and down, or how are they going? Just look for basic elements and take the first idea that comes to your mind, because the first idea is when you say, okay, what is it? 3 seconds after that, you're saying, well, that didn't work. Now I got to do this. I wonder what it could be, and then your mind gets into it, and it just makes a mess of things. So take that very first thing that comes into your mind, and even if there isn't much there, that can often then be the key to get more. You can say, oh, I saw a line and it went this way. All right, so draw a line that way. And now pause and say, all right, where's my next line? Oh, now you get another thing. Well, draw that. And people who get really detailed pictures actually end up drawing the picture, not all at once. It's not that they get it and then they draw the picture. They get a line, they get the next line, then they get the next line, then they put a circle up here, and you can see they're drawing the picture piece by piece, element by element, and they have no idea what it's going to be. It's just like, you ever seen artists that amaze you that way? They'll start and they'll put a circle here and a circle here and a line up there, then a squiggle down here and then something over here, and you're wondering, what in the heck is that? And eventually, when they're about 2/3 of the way done, the whole picture comes together, and you say, that's amazing. How did they know where to put all that stuff, ahead of time? But that's the way a lot of remote viewers work. They'll just put a line here and a line there. So sometimes you get it in a sequence of lines. So just put down whatever you get, and then see if there's any more. If you get something in, then put that down too. And see if there's any more, then put that down too, and just keep working with it until you don't get anything else. But I'll try to keep it in my mind, so if you want to pick my brain, you can do that. Okay, first we're going to do a healing experiment. Last time I told you that don't worry about left or right unless you intend that you know whether you're looking at the front or at the back of a person. If you want to get right and left, then do that intention. So intend about the humanoid shape. Intend about what the black and white means. You can intend about whether the thing's facing you or whether it's facing away from you. And when you make those intentions, hold the intention after you make it. Don't make it and throw it away. Hold the intention. And I'll give you a name and a first initial, and then on the next one, it's just going to be like, unknown, mystery person. But you can just send it to the mystery person, and it'll get to the right address because somebody somewhere knows who that mystery person is. And it'll just flow through me to whomever, to that person. So that's the nature of addresses. They don't have to be any more specific than something that you know that is unique And what you know that's unique is it's that mystery person I'm telling you about here that's part of this test. That's unique. There's only one mystery person in this whole universe that is the person that's the subject of this particular healing. So that's a unique identity. Okay? Well, get relaxed. Take a deep breath. If you hear noises and disturbances, just accept them and let them go. They're not important. Okay, experiment 6 is the healing of Mesa D. Mesa D. Write down what you've diagnosed. Remain floating in the void. When you're done, return to the void and begin healing Mesa D. Okay, now finish up your healing work. And when you're done, let that go and return to the void. Okay, our next experiment is a mystery subject. First, we're going to diagnose the subject. So, look at their health energy body and determine where the dark parts are. Now return and write down on the pictures where the dark areas were. Then return to the void and just wait there for a moment. Next, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to look at that health energy body, see those dark spots. Now shift your intent to see the emotional energy body, not the health energy body, but the emotional energy body of this mystery subject. Look at the shape, look at the colors, look at whatever you see in this energy body. That emotional energy body is often called the astral body. Okay, and on the same sheet of paper, draw a picture of what you've seen around the two small figures at the bottom of the page. Next, proceed to heal this mystery subject. Heal the places where you've seen darkness. Oh, I try to talk quietly, but next we're going to heal this mystery subject. Okay, so turn the places that were dark white. Bright iridescent white. Okay, now finish up your healing and return to the void. Experiment 8 is a remote viewing experiment. I have a picture in front of me. I'm looking at it. Go into your mind and write down in the box of experiment 8 what you see. Okay, return and write down what you saw in experiment 8, if you haven't done so already. Beginning. Okay, next, let that go. And we're going to move on to experiment 9. I'm looking at an image that is experiment 9. Go inside of your mind and tell me what you see as experiment 9. What is this image? All right, return and write down what you have seen for image 9. Then after you're done, return to floating in the void. I have another remote viewing target. It's image, or it's experiment number 10. Go inward into your mind and look at image 10, experiment 10, and see what it is. Okay, write down what you've seen for image 10. The next experiment, experiment 11. I am looking at an image. That is the image for experiment 11. So, drop into the inner mind and take a look. If you like, walk around with your consciousness behind me and look over my shoulder. Okay, return and write down, draw lines or a picture of what you saw in experiment 11. Then come all the way back and bring your attention back to this reality frame. Okay, would you like to give ground truth to the first healing?
So Mesa D is a newborn baby. She was born prematurely and she has a few little health issues that the doctors are still trying to work out. So did anybody get anything that we could maybe give them some information towards? Or? Okay. So in the shoulders and the neck area and arms? Throat. You got throat too, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay.
But definitely some breathing problem that's stemming from the muscles.
It's, okay.
That's all one.
Lung issues, okay. Okay. She was very premature, so that's what. Okay. Okay, I'll let them know. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the second mystery subject was me. So I didn't want to front load anybody because you obviously all probably know I've got arthritis diagnosed on my knees and they've got me on a replacement surgery list, but they don't want to do it because they said I'm too young. So I am firmly convinced that my friend Deb has put stem cells in my knees and they're good for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I, for some reason, recreate the issue. So maybe you're looking at my energy body, you have some advice or some help. So anything you got, I would be happy to hear. Yeah, I did. Okay, so it has to do with that. All right.
Chiropractor means there's a left SI issue, giving you a knee issue, and you have an ankle issue, and a right shoulder, something like
Okay, so can I come see you?
that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, I can do that. Great, I'll make an appointment with you.
MBT business.
Yeah. Anybody else?
The first when we did experiment, what's wrong with Mesa D?
They don't know the doctor. She was just born a couple days ago, so they, yeah, they just has to get. Yeah, I'll let the doctors and parents.
All right, I'll show you the pictures since I have them. I thought it might be a little bit of an advantage for me looking at the pictures this time. That's all right, I can show them around. Here's the first one, if you can see this, but it's an old, probably 1968 Cadillac with the big fins. Sitting at a jaunty 45-degree angle.
That's so cool.
Yeah, you got that right.
Yeah, I had it on the ankle. Yeah, I had it on the ankle.
Yeah, you got the right angle.
I drew a pitchfork from
Yeah. So the pitchfork is kind of the pointy little things at the end for the fins? Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. That was the first one we did. The next one has a lot of stripes in it. Lots of lines.
Yeah, I got that one.
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah, I got a lot of like stripes.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it's stripes or windows.
Hmm? Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The roof line, the up and down zigzaggy roof line, yes. Okay. Okay, lots of stripes, zigzaggy, up and down roof, and then lower stripes. Okay, the next one was, I don't know, looks sort of like Ronald McDonald. Or a clown anyway.
I got the hands and then his face.
Yes.
But if they have like this.
Mm-hmm. All right, and the last one was kind of hard, but the architectural elements are really simple, and that is a kind of a pastoral scene with just rolling hills in the background and a little lake. So it just would have been some ziggy figures, one after the other, and then kind of a little thing down the bottom. So it's very simple architectural lines.
Landing there, hey?
Huh?
No helicopters.
No helicopters landing there, no.
I got a chicken.
Well, maybe there's some chickens in there. I haven't seen them.
Same thing, but there was a tornado. There was a tornado at the lake. That's what I saw.
Tornado at the lake? Well, the lake part's right. There's the lake. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, that kind of thing is probably right. It's got that in it. Okay. Well, sounds like you did pretty well. Many of you got elements of it anyway. Okay. We still have just a little bit of time, so we can just keep marching right on. Anybody that left this late in the game that hasn't gotten their question answered? They've got this burning question they really want, but haven't gotten to it? Yes. Let's hear it.
I just wanted to ask you to share with us something that really interests you. It's like what you're looking at right now. You're interested.
What I'm interested in? Well, the primary thing I'm interested in, and since I arrived here, is providing all of you with information that would be useful. And that's what, that's my thing. That's what I focus on. And if I'm able to do that, if you're able to walk away from here with a little more understanding or a little bigger picture, then for me it's been a big success. And not everybody, but just even if a few people walk away with a bigger picture and a little bit better understanding of the nature of reality and kind of their place in it and what's going on, then I will feel like it's a big success. So that's really what's of interest to me. Other than that, I don't know, there isn't much other than that. That's really my thing. So that's where my interest is. I think, and I should tell you all, I think you've been a great group because we had a lot of interesting questions. And I got a chance to put answers down at a depth much deeper than I usually go with people. And I think that'll be interesting to the 10,000, 100,000 people that'll watch this on YouTube over the next 5 years. So I think your questions were excellent. There wasn't anything that was off the wall or silly or frivolous. They were all real good questions about the nature of reality. And that makes it a pleasure for me to do that, because then we get out stuff that's real significant for lots of people. So there wasn't a whole lot of us in this room, but that doesn't matter. We're going to have a big impact on 100,000 people eventually, just because of the questions you asked were good and they pulled out good information. It's going to be a very positive thing for lots and lots of people. So I thank you all for that. Yes.
In light of all the activity that you're doing louder. In light of all the activity that you've done the last 40, 50 years, the traveling, have you ever communicated with the larger consciousness? Communicated with it directly?
Sure. I communicate with the larger consciousness system all the time. I'd even say daily, even minutely. I'm kind of in that connection. I'm kind of in a meditation state most of the time. You notice I kind of get up here and then sometimes my eyes go shut and whatever. I'm kind of in that state most of the time anyway. Directly, I think almost all the communications are really directly, even if it's in the form of something else. You're really talking to the larger consciousness system. But that doesn't mean you have it's not like Google. You know, it's not like you go to Google and you look for things that you'd like to know. I don't use it that way. Mostly I use it in ways that will kind of help me do what it is I do, which is answer your questions. And I do that, you know, lots of places and lots of times. Everything else just takes care of itself. So I don't need to ask about all the other things that might happen. Whatever happens, happens, and I'll deal with that as it comes. And it's better that I deal with it when it comes. Otherwise, instead of dealing with it authentically, I'd be dealing with it out of the intellect because I was prepared and I had a, you know, I already had a story written up of, you know, what was going to happen. And it's much better if you just don't have any of that information. So I'm not interested really in any of that. So I don't ask those kinds of questions or get those kinds of answers. It's just basically, how can I do a better job here? How can we connect? Let's make the energy, let's make the connection, let's make this into a happening that's going to be valuable for lots and lots of people. So it's that sort of thing. And how do we do that? Mostly it's just get out of the way and let it happen. Let you guys ask your questions, which are things that you need to know, which are things that most everybody else needs to know too. And then the energy feeds off each other. And I'm not sure how you feel, but I notice there's a lot of really good energy in this room. And it's kind of special coming to an event like this. Special for me, it's like it's special for you. I get to meet a lot of really, really nice people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And you get to interact with each other and network some with people that you can talk to about this sort of thing, and that's kind of neat. And that's kind of on the surface, but beneath that, there's a sharing and a connection going on between all of us that wouldn't be there if you watched the video. And that connection is real. You know, you could pull on that connection of us being here. You can go back to that and ask your questions that you didn't get to ask, and you should expect to get answers. So it's a connection that we've made that will last and that you can use. So it's a tangible thing. It's one of the things you get out of kind of coming here and doing the Vulcan mind meld with me and, you know, letting us communicate at that level. So that can continue. You can take that home with you and keep that. So thank you very much for being a really great audience. And yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome. Do we have time, or we got a hard stop here where they're gonna have to come in and clean this room up?
Hard stop, but I just want to respect people who do have to leave at 4:30, so.
Yes. So we have a little extra time. Often when we stop, it's like we have 15 minutes to get out of the room so they can clean it up for something else. But in this case, we have a very soft ending, so we can kind of hang in here for a while if there's people that still have things to say.
Okay, you've talked before about the larger conscious system, basically how it partitions out new individuated units of consciousness to add, like the population of this world, I think it increases by net 200,000 per day, right? So we're going to need a lot more consciousness, either generated or partitioned or come from somewhere. But I'm just kind of wondering, like the larger conscious system, its quality of consciousness, is it homogeneous? Does it have like a section of ready for new individuating units of consciousness to carve off or partition off, place into this reality? How does it relate to people who've been in this reality multiple times and their quality is at a different level? So you got these individuated units with different levels of quality. You got the larger conscious system pumping out new ones. I imagine some get pulled back in, but does the larger conscious system, is it a homogeneous system, or has it got all these different sections to it?
No, it's not a homogeneous system. And of course, we're talking now about the executive part. The larger conscious system of which we're a part, we're a piece of that. But now you're looking at the executive section, the management section, or the operating system. And how does that handle generating new? Well, one, it doesn't have to generate all the new entries that we have for the however many 100,000 a day that come here. There's an awful lot of individuated unit of consciousness that are just off in less productive, loose, rule set virtual realities. So you can kind of go out and select just from what's out there. There's a lot of entities like that. So that's a pretty big pool of resource for it. Is that's already around but not really engaged in a entropy reduction trainer like this, but it's out there. So that's probably a big source. There's a lot of entities that fit into that category. Secondly, it has a way, I suspect, of generating new individuated units of consciousness that starts with some basic traits, some basic things that have to be there, and then probably this is for new. There's a certain amount of leeway, personality traits, if you will, that you can randomly pick from. So you've got a basic cookie cutter shape, and then you can pick all sorts of random traits that go with it. So I think it's that sort of thing. It doesn't start like a zero, doesn't have anything at all. It starts as a individuated unit of consciousness competent to be here. Now the other source it has, the third source it has, is consciousness that are working their way up the ladder. Particularly giving or caring dog, horse, monkey, pig, whatever, that's consciousness has been improving itself all along, and it's ready for something bigger, more choices, more challenge, which is what you get at this level, for the human level. There's a lot more choices and challenges to make than there is if you're any other creature. So that is another set of those who are ready to go on for something more challenging. And then those guys. So there's various sources that it gets, and it can pick from any of those. Probably does the first and the last first, and then if it doesn't get enough there, it can just generate some. But I think they're just generated around kind of an average entry-level consciousness. Is this created? You can copy and paste real easily in a digital system. You can say, well, here's about an average entry-level value. All right, copy, 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 and then let's do some random draws to fill these out to be different. We don't know a whole bunch of things that are all exactly alike, so we let them all be a bit different and then send them into the system. So it's not like you start out with a real high entropy, that everybody that starts here is a raving lunatic, homicidal maniac, because they're all really high entropy and they have to bring it down. It's not like that. That wouldn't be helpful. They're all probably somewhere normal, kind of average, but a lot to learn. They got a lot of general things, but they don't have a lot of specific things yet. So I think that's probably how it's done.
I actually just wanted to know, is there anything that takes you out of your Zen state? Like, is there anything that kind of can get you angry or something nice?
The question was, is there anything that takes me out of my Zen state? Yeah, the only thing that I can think of over many years that has the capacity to jerk me right out of the Zen state is my beloved other, who's just getting up and sneaking out of the back right now as I talk. Yeah. So.
Like you said, that interaction is one of the most important.
That's one of the most important interactions that you can have, because that is where the rubber meets the road more than any other place, because that's where you're connected at a very intimate level. You don't have layers of, of insulation there. It's right down in that. And there's a lot of, there's a lot riding on it too. It's an important relationship. Your relationships at work are sort of important, but you can smile and be nice to anybody if you have to work with them. If you got to live with them, it's a little more serious thing. You have to really make sure you get it right and have the right attitudes and do it the right way. So it's more serious. So I'd say that's about it. There's not much that pops me out of this Zen state. I pretty much go through life that way, and I don't even think of it as that. It's just normal. Is this life? Is this where I live? I've lived like this so long that I don't really see it as a special state. It's just normal life. It's just the way it is. And I'm kind of hard to nudge out of this. I'm not really focused here a whole lot in the sense that, that's why I'm not the organization guy. That's why you don't leave it to me to tell you it's time to eat lunch. We'd still be here probably without lunch yesterday. I just talk. I do my thing, and other people do the organization. So I have a couple of really sweet people that set up things like this. Okay, and the trip we're doing all around the world, I don't have anything about setting it up or the venues or what's charged for it or how, who gets what, the money that's collected. I'm outside of all of that. If I had to do all that, I'd still be back where I was, 10 years ago trying to do this. I'm not good at that, and I have no interest in it. I have a big interest in this, talking with people and being useful, but I don't have much of an interest in the business end of it. I can think of maybe 4 or 5 things I could do that would probably double book sales, in a couple of months, but I don't do any of them because they're kind of low on my priority list. Even though I know I should, because that would get more people, a chance to be involved, but they're just low on my priority list. So that's why I'm really happy when the boss stands up and says, it's time for this, it's time for that, because we need that. Discipline is important. But when I connect with a bunch of people, I kind of let that go. Now, if all I'm doing is managing my own life, I can do that pretty well. I can keep track of time and where I'm supposed to go and all our responsibilities. I'm not a complete idiot, has to be led around by my hand by a keeper. But when I'm doing something like this, I step out of that pretty much. And instead, I'm more the Zen guy because I'm more in contact with you and what I need to say and what your problems are, and say it in such a way that it will be useful to 100,000 other people later. Because there's always this problem of saying too much or saying too little. If you say too little, you've lost a chance to tell somebody something important. If you say too much, you're giving people more information than they can process, and that just confuses them. And sometimes that confusion kind of turns them off. So I talk to you, and sometimes I get a little close to the edge of saying things that all these other 100,000 people maybe you're going to have a hard time dealing with because I'm going a little deeper. So I try to go deep enough to make a difference to you, but not so deep that I scare other people. So I got a lot of that going on as I talk, trying to optimize what it is I say for you and for the larger audience that's going to watch it later. So that kind of keeps me busy. So that's why I get in kind of the zone and do this thing. And that's why I'm not very good at then managing the process. Like I told somebody else, I've stood up at podiums like this many times, and I came my watch, I take my watch off, I set it right up where I can see it, but just a little glancing at it, and that's the last time I look at it. I never look at it again after that, so I might as well just kept it on my wrist or kept it at home in a drawer. Normally in a day, I don't wear a watch. I only wear a watch when I go traveling and I do an event, and then I only look at it in the morning to see whether I really have to get out of bed or not. That's about all I use it for. Yeah.
One last question.
Recently, there's been quite an awakening of individual Alberta in the North Kingdom and connecting with crystals. And a lot of people can communicate directly with them. And I wonder if they're communicating with consciousness or just data.
Okay, tell me the very first part. I didn't hear that real well.
Oh, people are awakening to the mineral kingdom. And I just wondered when individuals that communicate with the crystals, if it's consciousness or just data.
Well, just data comes from a consciousness. Data doesn't create itself. All the data comes from a consciousness. When they're interested in crystals and they're using crystals to make contact and to get some kind of information that's connected with the crystal, then that crystal just becomes a tool. Okay, it becomes a tool that they use to focus their intent on the database. The crystal itself is not fundamental to the process. It's a tool, so it is important to the process, but it's not really fundamental. So if they could be convinced that, a ripe banana was their contact to the larger world, then a white banana would work for them because that would help them focus their contest. But if you suggested a ripe banana, it wouldn't work for anybody because it's silly. Crystals are kind of neat things. They've got neat connections, right? Like you say, a part of the earth, natural things, they're pretty, and they are low entropy minerals because they have arranged themselves in very precise orders. So it's a low entropy, natural thing that makes a good tool for focusing consciousness. So when they get data back, they're getting data from consciousness, and they get data that will answer the questions they pose or tell them the things that they need to hear for the most part, because that's the way the system works. If they're sincere in growing up and they want data to help them grow up, that will come back much better and stronger. If what they want to know is how to make more money or what to invest in or, am I the loveliest person in the land or whatever, if they want things that are not really on their growth path but are on their egoic path, not so much. What they get back will be more nonsense, just stuff that doesn't really mean a whole lot. So if you ask a question that's just kind of about stuff, you'll get an answer back that's just kind of about stuff. If you ask something that's really near to your heart, something important to you about your growth, you'll get something back that's really important to you about your growth. So it depends on what they ask and the intent they ask it with. Not really what they ask, I shouldn't say that. It's important the intent that they ask it with.
Recently I just read that they're neither solid nor liquid, that they're just vibration.
Well, I would think that's probably not so. You'd have to stretch the words to make that. You're talking to a physicist now. A Zen guy just left and the physicist just came in and sat down. And, there's very specific definitions for those things like liquids and solids and so on. And I'd say that that's somebody who's being poetic. And to take those words as metaphors, not as facts. There's an awful lot in the spiritual community that you have to interpret as metaphors, okay? Not as necessarily objective facts. If it doesn't flow and change its shape to fit its container, then it's not a fluid. That's one of the definitions of a fluid. Air will do that and water will do that, but a quartz crystal won't. It'll stay the same shape. So take those things in the sense that they were meant, not in the objective sense. If you look at it in the objective sense of exactly how those words are defined, you almost kill it with intellectualism. Let the intellect go and say, what do they mean by that? It's all vibration. Well, vibration's a physical term. Vibration means motion back and forth. In the larger conscious system, there is no motion back and forth because there's no back and forth. There's no space. So there really is no vibration. It's a metaphor, just like there is no light. But then you don't trash the sentiment just because the metaphor doesn't resonate with you. The sentiment is still there and it's still meaningful, and we know what they meant and the intent behind that and the feeling behind that, and all of that is valid. And if vibration is the metaphor they use to express it, that's fine. There's no problem with that at all. You'll just find us techie guys kind of when we hear that, because we've got this left brain sense of exactly what that definition is, and it doesn't fit, so we have a problem. That's why techie guys, up until this point, have had no on-ramp to the spiritual community. You had the spiritual community over here, and you had techies over there. scientists, engineers, whatever, programmers, all the techies, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, all the people work out of their left brain. And there's been this big gap between them. And the people in the spiritual community says, these people just don't get it. And the people in the techie left brain community say, those people are all kind of strange and they just, they're just lost. And there's this big gap. And that was really why, one of the reasons that I wrote My Big Toe was because I wanted to give the left brain people an on-ramp to the spiritual idea. They didn't have an on-ramp. The right brain people have hundreds of on-ramps. They have all kinds of books and things and writings and stuff that talk to them and they get and they can deal with. But the poor left brain techies are kind of left out because if it's not logical process, they can't go there because that's the only way they travel is in logical process. So when they hear somebody talking about the vibration, they immediately say, what's vibrating? What is it that's vibrating? And of course the right brain person says, that's not important, I don't know. It's just a vibration. And the left brain person says, I can't deal with that, I'm out of here. So they need an on-ramp too, a logical process that takes them to a more spiritual viewpoint of reality. And it's not that they generally are against the spiritual viewpoint of reality, it just isn't in their language. And if it's not in your language, you can't talk about it, you can't even think about it. It just is wrong.
Where's the map? Where's the map?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing. So when you talk about crystals and vibrations and so on, that comes out of a spiritual, a spiritual community that is in those terms. And I respect that because I know what you mean and I know the sense of it. And most of that language, kind of new age language, it's really mostly kind of right on as far as the bigger picture, what's going on. It's not really a problem. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just that most of you understand each other better than the left brainies people understand you. But yeah, crystals are nice. They make nice tools for focusing intent. But it's not the crystal that's fundamental. It's the use of it as a cool mineral, part of the earth, low entropy thing that makes it a nice tool for focusing intent. But the real intent is being focused in the mind of the person with the crystal, not the crystal doing something to that person's mind. The causality flows the other way. The crystal's not the active agent. The only active ingredient is the consciousness of the person that's doing it. But all the rest of it works just fine as metaphor.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So what do you think, engineers? Is that right? You need an on-ramp? Yeah.
The resonates totally, right? My big toe. You go, well, this is written by a physicist, and he's got the spiritual connection, right? So it makes it more believable for other people. Like, I have no problem with it anyhow, right? But a lot of engineers don't, which is a good thing. So there are content we're going to do that makes them think.
Yeah, I've had any number of people come up to me and say, I need to get a copy of your book for my husband. Yeah, lots of ladies have that idea. I'm going to get this book for him because he's not with me on this spiritual journey. He thinks that's a lot of nonsense. So I need a book that speaks to him. And so far, I think that's been reasonably successful. Somebody with an open mind and a good logical viewpoint of life, can, I think, can get a lot out of that path.
Marcel Vogel for crystals, right? He's a hero, right? He was IBM scientist. I'm sure you know lots about Marcel. Right? He proved how good crystals are as a whole.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I think we're done.
We call it a quits.
Because we need to even unpack things up and be out of here on time. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. It's my privilege and pleasure to be here. Oh, I always come back. As long as Beth is here, I'll be back. Okay.